A billionaire CEO falls in love at first sight with a girl who has nothing. Not a supermodel. Not an heiress. A 20-year-old student selling flowers on a rainy street corner just to pay for her tuition. But what started as a simple act of kindness turned into a storm of betrayal, blackmail, and a disappearance that still has people asking, did she run away or was she taken? This is the story of Magnus Hale, a man who could buy anything except the one thing he wanted most. And Elira Navarro, a girl who refused to be bought, no matter the price. Their love story shattered families, destroyed reputations, and left one question that haunts everyone who knew them. When you have everything to lose and nothing to gain, how far would you go for love? Now I have to ask you, if you had the chance to leave your world behind for love, even if it meant putting your family at risk, would you take it? Comment your answer below, because that's exactly the choice Elira Navarro faced when she met Magnus Hale. And here's what makes this story even more intense. She knew from the moment she met him that loving him could destroy everything she'd worked for. But sometimes the heart wants what it wants, regardless of the consequences. Picture this. Late evening, rain pouring, and a young woman stands clutching a bundle of roses wrapped in old newspaper. She's not selling them for profit. She's selling them for survival. Her shoes have holes, her jacket is 3 sizes too big, but her spine is straight and her eyes burn with determination. And then the kind of man who makes billion-dollar decisions with a single glance appears in front of her. What happens next would thrill, shock, and test them both in ways neither could imagine. You see, some people are born into money. Others fight for every penny. But what happens when these two worlds collide? When a girl who's never owned anything valuable meets a man who's never had to fight for anything. That collision would change everything. The rain hit the pavement like bullets that October night, and most people had the sense to stay indoors. Most people, but not Elira Navarro. She stood on the corner of 5th and Main, water dripping from her dark hair, holding a bundle of roses that looked as beaten down as she felt. 20 years old, 2 jobs, 1 sick mother, and a little brother who still believed in fairy tales. That's what Elira's world looked like. Every rose she sold meant another day her mother could afford her medication. Every dollar meant her brother Carlos could stay in school instead of dropping out to work. The roses weren't perfect, far from it. Some petals were bruised, others wilted from the rain. But Elira had learned that imperfect things could still be beautiful. They just had to find the right person to see it. Roses. Fresh roses. Her voice cut through the storm, though her throat was raw from calling out all day. A couple hurried past without looking. A businessman in an expensive coat stepped around her like she was invisible. She'd rather sell roses than sell her soul. Would you have the courage to do the same? Elira's pride was the one thing poverty couldn't touch. When her high school guidance counselor suggested she quit college and find a wealthy boyfriend, Elira walked out. When her roommate offered to introduce her to generous older men who help young girls with their bills, Elira packed her bags that same night. She could have taken the easy path, could have smiled pretty, worn short skirts, and let some rich man solve all her problems. But that wasn't who Elira Navarro was. She'd work her hands raw before she'd compromise her dignity. The clock on the bank across the street showed 9:47 p.m., almost closing time. Her feet ached, her clothes were soaked through, and she'd only sold 6 roses all day. Not enough to cover her mother's prescription, let alone groceries. That's when she saw him. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, sleek as a panther in the night. The window rolled down, and Elira caught a glimpse of dark eyes studying her through the rain. Not looking through her like she was nothing, actually seeing her. How much for all of them? The voice was deep, commanding, the kind that was used to being obeyed. Elira blinked water from her eyes. All of them. Every single rose. She did the math quickly. 43 roses left, $3 each. $129. Without hesitation, He handed her $200 bills. "Keep the change." As their fingers touched during the exchange, something electric passed between them. Something that would change both their lives forever. But neither of them knew it yet. The sedan drove away, leaving Alira standing in the rain with more money than she'd made in 2 weeks, and questions that would keep her awake all night. Magnus Hale never stopped walking for anyone. At 32, he owned half the city's skyline and controlled more wealth than some small countries. People moved out of his way, not the other way around. Board meetings trembled at his presence. Stock prices jumped when he spoke. But something about that girl on the corner had made him slam on his brakes. He sat in his penthouse office 3 days later, staring out at the rain-soaked streets below, thinking about dark eyes that refused to look away. Most people either cowered or tried to impress him. She'd done neither. "Sir." His assistant knocked. "The Tokyo investors are waiting. Tell them 5 minutes." Magnus loosened his tie. He'd built an empire on perfect timing, calculated risks, and never letting emotions cloud judgment. So why couldn't he stop thinking about a flower girl who didn't even know his name? That evening, he found himself back on 5th and Main. Same corner, same girl, same roses fighting against the weather. This time, he got out of the car. "You again." Alira looked up as his shadow fell across her small stand. "Let me guess, you want to buy all my roses again?" "Actually, I was thinking just one this time." Magnus studied her face. Up close, she was even more striking, not magazine beautiful, but real in a way that made his chest tight. $3. She held out a single white rose, stem dripping. "They're not for sale to people who pity me," she said suddenly, pulling the flower back. Magnus blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me. I don't need your charity. Find some other poor girl to make yourself feel better about having too much money." The words hit him like ice water. When was the last time someone had challenged him? When had anyone dared to assume they knew his motives? "What if it's not pity?" Magnus asked quietly. "Then what is it?" "Curiosity." He met her gaze directly. "You stood in a storm for hours selling flowers. Most people would have gone home. Most people don't have a sick mother and a little brother counting on them." There it was, the fire he'd seen from his car window. The stubborn pride that made her stand straight even when life was trying to knock her down. "I'm Magnus," he said, extending his hand. Alira hesitated, then shook it briefly. Her hand was small, calloused from work. "Alira." "Nice to meet you." Alira, who doesn't take charity. Despite herself, her mouth twitched toward a smile. "Nice to meet you." Magnus, who buys flowers in thunderstorms. That night, Magnus couldn't concentrate on quarterly reports. All he could think about was the way she'd looked at him, not like a bank account or a business opportunity, but like a person she was trying to figure out. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now so you don't miss how their story unfolds, because what happens next will shock you. 5 days straight. That's how long Magnus kept coming back. Not just driving by, actually stopping, getting out, buying a single rose each time, and asking questions that had nothing to do with flowers. "What are you studying in college?" "Psychology." "I want to help kids like my brother." "What's your favorite book?" "I don't have time for favorites. I read textbooks." "If money wasn't an issue, what would you do?" Alira had stopped answering that one. Dreams were dangerous when you couldn't afford them. But Magnus kept coming. Same time each evening, like clockwork. 7:15 p.m., when the business crowd thinned out and the street got quieter. He'd buy his rose, they'd talk for exactly 10 minutes. Then he'd leave. Other vendors started whispering. "Who's the guy in the fancy suits? Why is he always talking to the flower girl? That's a $5,000 watch he's wearing." Alira tried to ignore the stares. Tried to convince herself this was just some rich man's weird hobby. But the way Magnus looked at her, like she was the most interesting person he'd ever met, made her stomach flip in ways she couldn't control. "You know I looked you up," she said on Thursday evening, rain drumming against the sidewalk. Magnus paused, rose halfway to his car. And Magnus Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, worth about $4 billion. She crossed her arms. So my question is, why are you really here? Would you believe me if I said I like talking to you? Men like you don't talk to girls like me unless they want something. Maybe I do want something. Magnus stepped closer, and Alira caught a hint of expensive cologne mixed with rain. Maybe I want to know why you're the first person in 10 years who's treated me like I'm just a guy buying flowers. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, she saw past the perfect suit and the confidence, saw something almost lonely underneath. Because that's what you are when you're standing here, she said quietly. Just a guy who keeps buying roses he probably throws away. I don't throw them away. What do you do with them? Magnus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. I put them in water and wonder what you're thinking about when you're not selling flowers. The words hung between them like a confession. Would you trust someone like him or push them away? Comment below, because Alira was about to make a choice that would change everything. That night, as Magnus drove home with his single white rose, he didn't notice the black SUV following 3 cars behind. Didn't see the telephoto lens capturing every moment of their conversation. But someone was watching. Someone who didn't like what they saw. And they were about to make their displeasure very clear. The photo arrived on Monday morning. Alira found it slipped under her apartment door. No envelope, no return address. Just a single sheet of paper that made her blood turn to ice. Her brother Carlos, walking home from school. The picture was taken from across the street, perfectly focused, professional quality. Someone had been following him. On the back, written in block letters, "Stay away from Magnus Hale, or he won't make it home." Alira's hands shook as she stared at her little brother's innocent face. 12 years old, backpack slung over his shoulder, completely unaware that danger was stalking him. Meanwhile, across town, Magnus was facing his own storm. "Sir, we need to discuss your recent activities." Board member Victoria Cross sat across from his desk, her expression sharper than her tailored suit. Which activities would those be? Magnus didn't look up from his laptop. The flower vendor on 5th Street. People are talking. Now Magnus raised his eyes. Let them talk. A billionaire CEO buying roses from a street girl every night? The press will have a field day. Your reputation. My reputation is my concern. Actually, it's our concern too. We have shareholders to think about. Investors who trust Hale Industries because they trust your judgment. Victoria leaned forward. Dating beneath your station reflects poorly on all of us. I'm not dating anyone. Then what exactly are you doing? Magnus closed his laptop with a sharp click. I'm buying flowers from a hard-working college student. If that threatens anyone's confidence in my business decisions, they're welcome to sell their shares. But even as he said it, Magnus could feel the walls closing in. The whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms. The way his security team had been asking more questions about his evening routes. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Magnus Hale. "Mr. Hale, you don't know me, but I know about your little flower girl." The voice was cold, mechanical, clearly using a voice changer. "Walk away now or things get messy." Who is this? Someone with your best interests at heart. That girl isn't who you think she is. Stop seeing her or the consequences will be permanent. The line went dead. Magnus stared at his phone, adrenaline spiking. In 15 years of business, he'd made enemies. Competitors who'd tried to sabotage deals, politicians who'd threatened investigations, even a few kidnapping attempts. But this felt different. Personal. He called his head of security immediately. "I want to know who's been watching me. And I want protection on a girl named Alira Navarro. Full surveillance, starting now." "Sir, if there's a credible threat." "There is. And if anything happens to her because of me," Magnus' voice turned deadly quiet, "I'll destroy whoever's responsible." But across town, Elira was staring at her brother's photo, fear and fury battling in her chest. She'd worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let some rich man's problems destroy her family, even if that rich man was starting to mean everything to her. That evening, when Magnus arrived at 5th and Main, Elira was waiting. But she wasn't selling flowers. "We need to talk." Her voice was steady, but Magnus caught the tremor underneath. "Elira, what's wrong?" She pulled the photograph from her jacket and thrust it at him. Magnus' face went white as he recognized Carlos walking home from school. "Someone's been following my brother. They left this under my door with a message: 'Stay away from you, or he won't make it home.'" Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So congratulations, Magnus. You got what you wanted." "What I wanted?" "To turn my life upside down. To make me care about someone I can't have." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "This is what your world brings me. Threats against a 12-year-old boy who's never hurt anyone in his life." Magnus reached for her, but she stepped back. "I won't be part of it. I can't." She picked up her box of roses, hands shaking. "Find someone else to buy flowers from. Someone whose family won't pay the price for your attention." "Elira, please. Let me fix this." "You can't fix this." The words exploded out of her. "You think your money can solve everything? You think because you're rich and powerful, you can just wave your hand and make the danger disappear?" Magnus stood there, watching the strongest person he'd ever met finally break under the weight of loving someone she couldn't protect. "My brother is the only good thing I have left in this world," she whispered. "I won't gamble with his life. Not for anyone. Not even for what? For you." The admission hung between them like a blade. "I was starting to fall for you, Magnus. And that's exactly why I have to walk away." She turned to leave, roses spilling from her arms onto the wet pavement. White petals scattered like snow, trampled by passing feet. For the first time in his adult life, Magnus Hale felt completely powerless. He could buy corporations, influence governments, move markets with a single phone call. But he couldn't make the woman he was falling for stay safe just by loving her. "Elira," he called after her retreating figure. "This isn't over. I'll find out who's threatening you, and I'll stop them." She paused without turning around. "Some things can't be stopped, Magnus. Some prices are too high to pay." Then she disappeared into the crowd, leaving Magnus standing alone among the scattered roses. Would you stay for love, or leave to protect your family? Drop your answer in the comments, because what Elira doesn't know is that walking away from Magnus Hale might be the most dangerous thing she's ever done. The people threatening her family aren't going to stop just because she's no longer seeing him. In fact, they're just getting started. Magnus Hale had built his empire by refusing to accept no for an answer. So when Elira walked away, he did what any billionaire would do. He made it impossible for her to disappear. It started small. Her college tuition mysteriously paid in full. Financial aid error, the registrar claimed. But Elira knew better. Then fresh roses appeared on her doorstep every morning. White ones, like the kind she'd sold him. No note, no signature. "Someone's watching out for you," her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez said, eyeing the expensive black car that waited outside Elira's classes each day. Not following, just there. A silent reminder that Magnus hadn't given up. Elira tried to ignore it. She focused on her studies, worked double shifts at the diner, pretended her heart didn't skip every time she thought she saw a familiar figure in a crowd. But Magnus was patient, persistent. 3 weeks after their confrontation, he finally cornered her outside the library. "Your brother's safe," were his first words. "I have a team watching him. Professional security, former military. No one gets near Carlos without my people knowing about it." Elira clutched her textbooks tighter. "I told you. You told me to stay away. I did. But that doesn't mean I stopped caring about what happens to you. Magnus. One evening. That's all I'm asking." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, thick, cream-colored paper with gold edges. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night. 500 of the city's most powerful people, all writing checks for children's hospitals." Despite herself, Alira was intrigued. "Why would you want me there?" "Because you're the only person in that room who'll be real." Magnus stepped closer, and she caught that familiar scent of rain and expensive cologne. "Everyone else will be performing, playing roles, trying to impress each other with their wealth and connections. And you think I won't? I think you'll see right through all of it, just like you saw through me." Alira stared at the invitation. Part of her, the sensible part, wanted to hand it back and walk away. But another part, the part that had been dreaming about Magnus for 3 weeks, whispered dangerous things. "One evening," she said finally. Magnus' smile could have lit up the city. One evening. What Alira didn't know was that accepting that invitation would be the most dangerous decision of her life. Because while Magnus was falling deeper in love, someone else was watching their every move. Someone who saw opportunity in their connection. Someone who was about to turn their love story into a weapon. The gala wasn't just a charity event. It was the perfect stage for a plan that had been months in the making. A plan that would test everything Alira and Magnus thought they knew about trust, loyalty, and sacrifice. And it would end with one of them making an impossible choice that would change everything. The Regency Hotel ballroom glittered like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across marble floors. String quartets played while waiters in white gloves served champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a month. Alira felt like an imposter. The dress Magnus had sent fit perfectly. Midnight blue silk that hugged her curves and made her feel beautiful and terrified at the same time. But as she walked into the ballroom on his arm, she could feel the stares. The whispered conversations behind jeweled hands. Who is she? Where did Magnus find her? She's pretty, but look at those shoes, definitely not designer. Magnus seemed oblivious to the attention, guiding her through the crowd with easy confidence. Champagne. I don't drink. Of course you don't. His smile was soft, genuine. What would you like? To not feel like everyone's staring at us. They are staring, but not for the reason you think. Magnus leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. They're staring because you're the most beautiful woman in this room, and they can't figure out how I got so lucky. Before Alira could respond, a voice cut through the music. Magnus, there you are. Victor Caro materialized beside them, tall, silver-haired, with a kind of predatory smile that made Alira's skin crawl. Magnus' business partner and oldest friend, though the way his eyes lingered on Alira suggested friendship wasn't his only interest. Victor. Magnus' tone cooled several degrees. Alira, this is Victor Caro. Victor Alira Navarro. The famous flower girl. Victor's handshake lingered too long. I've heard so much about you. Nothing too scandalous, I hope, Alira said, trying to keep her voice light. On the contrary, Magnus hasn't talked about anything else for weeks. Victor's smile never reached his eyes. Tell me, what's a college student doing at an event like this? Studying the habits of the wealthy for some psychology project. The insult was wrapped in silk, but it still cut deep. Alira felt her cheeks burn. Actually, Magnus said, his voice turning dangerous, Alira's here because I invited her. Just like I invited you. Though, I'm starting to question that decision. Victor held up his hands in mock surrender. No offense intended. Just curious about your new interests. As Victor melted back into the crowd, Alira watched him go with growing unease. Something about the man felt wrong. Calculated. Like he was playing a game where she didn't know the rules. Don't let him get to you, Magnus said quietly. Victor's always been threatened by anything he can't control. But across the ballroom, Victor Caro was already making phone calls. Already setting plans in motion. Because he'd been watching Magnus for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. And Magnus' obsession with a poor college girl was exactly the weapon Victor needed. The trap was about to spring, and neither Magnus nor Elira saw it coming. The envelope arrived 2 days after the gala. Elira found it slipped under her apartment door, just like the threatening photo of Carlos. But this time, the paper was expensive. Corporate letterhead. Victor Caro Law Firm embossed in gold at the top. Inside was a contract and a check for $50,000. Termination of association agreement. The document read in cold legal language. Elira's hands shook as she scanned the terms. She was to cease all contact with Magnus Hale immediately. No phone calls, no meetings, no communication of any kind. In return, she'd receive $50,000, enough to cover her mother's medical bills for 2 years, Carlos's private school tuition, and her own college expenses. But it was the final paragraph that made her blood freeze. Failure to comply with the terms of this agreement will result in the immediate termination of all protections currently afforded to the Navarro family. The signatory acknowledges that Magnus Hale's security detail will be withdrawn, leaving said family vulnerable to any and all threats previously outlined. There was a photo paper-clipped to the back page. Carlos again. But this time he wasn't walking home from school. He was sitting in their apartment, doing homework at the kitchen table. Someone had been inside their home. Someone had stood close enough to her little brother to hurt him. Elira's phone rang. Unknown number. I trust you received my proposal. Victor Caro's voice was smooth as poison. You sick? Now. No need for unpleasantries. This is simply business. She could hear the smile in his voice. Magnus has something I want, controlling interest in Hale Industries. And you, my dear, are going to help me get it. I'll never. Oh, but you will. You see, Magnus is in love with you. Hopelessly, completely in love. When you disappear from his life, he'll be devastated, distracted. His judgment will suffer, his focus will waver, and when the board votes on his leadership next month, you're insane. I'm practical. Magnus built his empire on cold calculation, but love makes people weak, emotional, and emotional leaders make mistakes. Victor's voice turned sharp. Big enough mistakes to get them voted out by concerned shareholders. Magnus will know it was you. Will he? Or will he assume you took the money and ran? After all, $50,000 is more than a girl like you has ever seen. Who could blame you for choosing financial security over fairy tale romance? Elira stared at the contract through tears. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning, your brother won't make it to school. Oh, it'll look like an accident. Hit and run driver, perhaps. Tragic, really. 12-year-old boy, his whole life ahead of him. You monster. I'm a businessman. Sign the contract, take the money, and disappear. Refuse, and you'll watch your brother pay the price. The line went dead. Imagine this was you. Would you take the deal or risk everything? Comment below, because Elira was about to make a choice that would destroy the man she loved to save the family she couldn't live without. Subscribe now so you don't miss how she makes the impossible choice. For 3 days, the contract sat on Elira's kitchen table like a loaded gun. $50,000. More money than her family had ever seen. Enough to solve every financial problem that had kept her awake at night for years. All she had to do was break Magnus' heart. You've been staring at that paper for hours, Carlos said, sliding into the chair across from her. At 12, he was too smart for his own good, already asking questions about the black cars that followed him to school, the new locks on their apartment door. It's nothing, baby. Just school stuff. Is it about the rich guy? Carlos's dark eyes, so much like hers, studied her face. The one who's been sending you flowers. Elira's chest tightened. What do you know about any rich guy? I'm not stupid, Lyra. Mom talks about him when she thinks I'm not listening. She says he makes you happy. Carlos reached across the table and touched her hand. You deserve to be happy. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her 12-year-old brother, who'd never had a childhood because their father abandoned them, who wore second-hand clothes and never complained, wanted her to be happy, even if it might cost him everything. That night, Magnus called. "I haven't seen you since the gala," he said, and she could hear the worry in his voice. "Are you avoiding me?" "No, I've been busy. School, work, you know." "Elira, what's wrong? You sound different." She closed her eyes, gripping the phone so tight her knuckles went white. "Nothing's wrong. I'm fine." "You're lying." Magnus' voice was gentle but certain. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." Together. The word she'd been dreaming of for weeks. The word that could get her brother killed. "I can't see you anymore," she whispered. Silence stretched across the line like a chasm. "Why?" Magnus' voice was barely audible. Because this isn't real. What we have. It's not sustainable. You live in penthouses, and I sell flowers on street corners. That's not a love story, Magnus. That's a fantasy. Don't do this. Don't push me away because you're scared." "I'm not scared. I'm being realistic." Each lie felt like swallowing glass. "I've been thinking about what you said at the gala. About me being real. Well, here's some reality for you. I don't belong in your world. And you don't belong in mine." "Elira." "Goodbye, Magnus." She hung up and immediately turned off her phone. Then she sat at her kitchen table, picked up the pen with trembling fingers, and signed Victor Caro's contract. The check was in her account the next morning. $50,000 that felt like 30 pieces of silver. But Carlos was safe. Her mother could afford her medication. And Magnus would never know the real reason she'd walked away. At least, that's what she told herself. What Elira didn't know was that Magnus Hale hadn't survived 15 years in cutthroat business by accepting defeat gracefully. He was already digging for the truth. And when he found it, there would be hell to pay. The betrayal came from the person Elira trusted most. Kalia Rodriguez had been her best friend since freshman year, the girl who'd helped her study for finals, who'd covered her shifts at the diner when her mother was sick, who'd sworn she'd always have Elira's back. So when Kalia found the contract hidden under Elira's mattress, Elira thought she was safe confiding in her. "I had to sign it," Elira whispered, tears streaming down her face. They were going to hurt Carlos. "I couldn't let that happen." Kalia held her while she sobbed, stroking her hair like she used to when they were kids. "You did the right thing. Family comes first." But what Elira didn't see was the calculation in Kalia's eyes. The way her fingers traced the $50,000 figure on the contract. The mental math of what that kind of money could buy. Kalia had her own problems. Student loans drowning her, a sick grandmother she couldn't afford to help, dreams of law school that seemed impossible without money. And Victor Caro had made her an offer she couldn't refuse. "All you have to do is bring me proof," he'd said during their secret meeting 3 days earlier. "Proof that she took the money. I'll give you $10,000, enough to handle your immediate problems." So while Elira slept, exhausted from crying, Kalia quietly photographed every page of the contract. The signature, the check stub, even the threatening photo of Carlos. By morning, the evidence was in Victor's hands. By noon, it was in every major newspaper in the city. Billionaire's flower girl exposed in shocking bribe deal. Gold digger or victim. The truth behind Magnus Hale's mystery romance. From street corner to scandal. How a college student played a CEO for $50,000. The headlines were brutal. The photos were worse, grainy shots of Elira signing the contract, blown up and displayed like evidence in a criminal trial. Magnus saw the news while reviewing quarterly reports. His assistant knocked hesitantly on his office door. "Sir, you might want to see this." The newspaper hit his desk like a bomb. There, in black and white, was proof that everything Elira had told him was a lie. The rejection call. The claims about not belonging in his world. The tears in her voice when she said goodbye. all of it an act. A performance designed to extract maximum payment from Victor's contract. Magnus stared at Alira's signature, his hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. He'd been played. Manipulated by a girl who'd seen dollar signs instead of love. The worst part? A small voice in his head had been warning him from the beginning, telling him that a girl like her couldn't really care about a man like him, that it was too good to be true. Now he had proof. And Magnus Hale had never been angrier in his life. Meanwhile, Alira was learning about her public humiliation the same way everyone else did, from the morning news playing in the diner where she worked. Her face filled the screen. Her signature. Her shame broadcast to millions. Breaking news, the anchor announced cheerfully. Local college student Alira Navarro has been exposed in what appears to be an elaborate scheme to extract money from billionaire CEO Magnus Hale. Alira dropped the coffee pot she'd been holding. It shattered on the floor, but she barely heard it over the sound of her world ending. Magnus arrived at the diner 20 minutes after the story broke. Alira saw him through the window, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with the kind of cold fury that had destroyed business empires. Every instinct told her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The bell chimed as he entered. Conversations died. Every customer turned to stare at the billionaire CEO confronting his alleged gold-digging ex-girlfriend. Outside, now, his voice could have frozen fire. Alira's co-worker shot her a sympathetic look. "Go. I'll cover your tables." They stood in the alley behind the diner, garbage cans and broken dreams as their witnesses. Magnus pulled out his phone and showed her the headlines. Her face splashed across every major news site. "Is it true?" His voice was deadly quiet. Alira opened her mouth to explain, then stopped. How could she tell him about Victor's threats without putting Magnus in danger? How could she explain that every dollar of that money was blood money, paid for with her own heart? Magnus. Yes or no, Alira? Did you sign a contract with Victor Caro for $50,000 to disappear from my life? She looked at his face, the man who'd bought roses in thunderstorms, who'd made her believe in fairy tales, who'd protected her brother without being asked. The man she loved more than her own life. And she lied. Yes. The word hit him like a physical blow. She watched something die in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or trust. Or love. "Why?" he whispered. "Because I needed the money." Each word felt like swallowing razor blades. My mother's medical bills, Carlos's school, my tuition. $50,000 was more than I could make in 5 years selling flowers. So everything, the talks, the gala, the way you looked at me, it was all fake. Alira forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'm a good actress." Magnus stepped back like she'd slapped him. For a moment, she saw past his anger to the hurt underneath, raw, devastating pain that made her want to take back every lie. "You played me perfectly," he said softly. The proud girl who wouldn't accept charity. The struggling student with a sick mother. The way you pushed me away at first, that was brilliant. Made me chase you harder. Magnus. No. His voice turned to ice. You don't get to say my name anymore. You don't get to look at me like that. Like you actually cared. He pulled out his wallet and threw $500 at her feet. For your time. Professional rates for professional services. The money scattered in the wind. Bills dancing around broken glass and cigarette butts. Alira didn't move to pick them up. Leave, Magnus said, turning away. Get out of this city. Take your blood money and go anywhere but here. And if I ever see you again, if you ever come near me or anyone I care about, I'll destroy you so completely that your name will be a cautionary tale. He paused at the alley entrance. I loved you, he said without looking back. I actually loved you. I hope $50,000 was worth it. Then he was gone, leaving Alira alone with the scattered bills and the ruins of everything she tried to protect. She stood there for an hour, crying until there were no tears left. When she finally moved, it wasn't to collect the money Magnus had thrown at her. Instead, she walked to her apartment, packed a single bag, and wrote a note for Carlos. I have to go away for a while. Be safe. Be good. I love you more than all the stars. By midnight, Elira Navarro had vanished from the city like she'd never existed at all. But sometimes disappearing is the most dangerous thing you can do. Sometimes it makes people realize what they've lost. And sometimes it makes them willing to do anything to get it back. 3 weeks passed before Magnus learned the truth. He'd thrown himself into work with manic intensity, pulling 18-hour days, acquiring companies, crushing competitors, anything to avoid thinking about dark eyes and white roses. But the rage that had sustained him was slowly giving way to something worse. Doubt. The doubt started small. Why would Victor care enough about Magnus' love life to orchestrate such an elaborate scheme? How had the media gotten those photos so quickly? And why had Elira looked genuinely shocked when he confronted her, like she was hearing about the contract for the first time? Magnus was reviewing security footage from the office building when he saw it. Kalia Rodriguez, entering Victor's law firm 2 days before the scandal broke. She stayed for exactly 1 hour. When she left, she was carrying a manila envelope, the same envelope that had contained the contract photos. Magnus' blood turned to ice. He called his head of security immediately. I need everything you can find on Kalia Rodriguez. Financial records, phone calls, bank deposits. Everything. The information came back within hours. $10,000 deposited into Kalia's account the day after the story broke. A payment from Victor Caro's personal checking account. But it was the phone records that made Magnus see red. 17 calls between Kalia and Victor in the 2 weeks leading up to the scandal, including one 3-hour conversation the night before Elira signed the contract. Magnus slammed his fist against his desk, so hard his coffee mug shattered. How had he been so blind? So quick to believe the worst about the woman who'd looked at him like he hung the moon. He called Kalia directly. Magnus? I wasn't expecting. How much did he pay you? His voice was deadly calm. Silence stretched across the line. I don't know what you're talking about. $10,000, Kalia. From Victor Caro's personal account. Deposited the day after you betrayed your best friend. He heard her sharp intake of breath. She signed that contract willingly. After Victor threatened to kill her brother. Magnus' control finally snapped. You sold out the only person who cared about you for 10,000 pieces of silver. How does it feel to be Judas? You don't understand. I needed the money. Everyone needs money. Not everyone destroys their friends to get it. Magnus' voice dropped to a whisper. Where is she? I don't know. She disappeared. Find her. Use whatever connections you have, whatever resources you need. Find Elira Navarro, or I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of person you really are. He hung up and immediately called his security team. I need you to find someone who doesn't want to be found. Elira Navarro. Start with family, friends, work records. Check bus stations, airports, train terminals. I want cameras, phone records, credit card transactions, everything. If you were Magnus, would you confront Victor or let it go? Comment below, because what Magnus was about to do would either save the woman he loved or destroy them both. Because some betrayals demand blood. And Victor Caro was about to learn that crossing Magnus Hale was the biggest mistake of his life. Magnus didn't call ahead. He drove straight to Victor's estate, 23 rooms of marble and mahogany that had been bought with stolen dreams and broken promises. The security guards at the gate knew better than to stop him. Victor was in his study, smoking a Cuban cigar and reading stock reports, when Magnus kicked in the door. Well. Victor didn't even flinch as the door frame splintered. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Where is she? Magnus' voice was deadly quiet. Who? Your little flower girl. Victor took a leisurely puff of his cigar. I assume she's somewhere warm, spending that $50,000. probably laughing about how easy it was to fool the great Magnus Hale. Magnus crossed the room in 3 strides and slammed Victor against the wall, sending books and papers flying. She never wanted the money. You threatened to kill her brother. Can you prove that? Victor's smile was serpentine. Because all the evidence says otherwise. Poor little college girl sees rich boyfriend, decides to cash in. Tale as old as time. You manipulated her. Used her love for her family as a weapon. I used the tools available to me. Victor straightened his tie, completely unruffled. Just like you would have done in my position. I would never. Wouldn't you? Victor's eyes gleamed with malice. You destroyed 3 companies last year alone. Put hundreds of people out of work. How is that different from what I did to one girl? Magnus felt something snap inside his chest. Because those were business decisions. This was personal. You destroyed an innocent woman to get to me. And it worked beautifully. Victor poured himself a brandy with steady hands. The board voted me controlling interest yesterday. Hale Industries is mine now, thanks to your emotional instability over a street girl. The words hit Magnus like a physical blow. In his obsession with finding Elira, he'd neglected the business. Missed crucial meetings. Let Victor position himself as the stable alternative. You won't get away with this. I already have. Victor raised his glass in a mock toast. Here's to love, Magnus. The greatest weakness of all. Magnus pulled out his phone and hit record. Tell me again how you threatened to kill a 12-year-old boy. Victor's smile faltered. Tell me how you blackmailed Calia Rodriguez into betraying her best friend. How you orchestrated this entire scheme to steal my company. You're recording me. Smart man. Magnus stepped closer. Now you have a choice. You can confess everything and face the legal consequences of extortion, conspiracy, and terrorist threats. Or what? Magnus' smile was colder than Arctic wind. Or I release this conversation to every news outlet in the country, along with the financial records showing your payments to Calia. Your reputation will be destroyed. Your clients will abandon you. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering when I'll strike next. Victor's face went pale. You can't prove the threats. I don't have to. The court of public opinion doesn't require evidence beyond reasonable doubt. Magnus pocketed his phone. You have 24 hours to confess, or I destroy you the way you tried to destroy her. But as Magnus walked away, one question haunted him. Where was Elira? And was she still alive to hear his apology? Magnus found her at the place it all began. 5th and Main, 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. The same corner where she'd sold roses in the rain, where he'd first fallen in love with a girl who refused to be bought. But now the corner was empty except for one figure huddled against the wind. Elira. She looked thinner, older somehow. Her dark hair was shorter, her clothes different, a worn leather jacket, faded jeans, boots that had walked too many miles. But her eyes were the same. Elira. Her name came out like a prayer. She turned, and for one heartbreaking moment, her face lit up with pure joy. Then reality crashed back, and her expression shuttered closed. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Neither should you. I've been looking for you for weeks. Magnus stepped closer, careful not to spook her. I know about Victor. About the threats. About what really happened. Tears spilled down her cheeks. It doesn't matter now. Of course it matters. You saved your brother's life. You sacrificed everything to protect the people you love. Magnus reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I said those things in the alley. Magnus. Come home with me. Let me fix this. Let me protect you the way I should have from the beginning. For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. Then she shook her head. We can't go back. Not after everything that's happened. Her voice broke. Too much damage has been done. Too many people got hurt because of us. The only people who got hurt were the ones who deserved it. Victor's finished. The authorities are investigating him for extortion and conspiracy. He can't touch you or your family anymore. It's not just Victor. Elira glanced nervously at the shadows between buildings. There are others. People with more money, more power. People who don't like it when their carefully laid plans get disrupted. What are you talking about? Before she could answer, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The engine was silent, electric, expensive, untraceable. The back window rolled down just enough for someone inside to gesture urgently. Elira's face went pale. I have to go. No. Magnus grabbed her arm. You don't have to go anywhere with them. Stay with me. Let me handle this. You don't understand. These people, they're not like Victor. They don't make threats. They just act. She touched his face gently, memorizing it. I love you. I've loved you since the night you bought all my roses. But sometimes love isn't enough. She pulled away and walked toward the waiting car. Elira, wait. She paused at the car door. If you really love me, don't follow. Don't try to find me again. Live your life, Magnus. Be happy. Then she was gone, swallowed by the night and the purr of expensive machinery. Did she leave by choice, or was she taken? Comment below, because what Magnus was about to discover would change everything he thought he knew about power, corruption, and just how far some people would go to keep their secrets buried. The game was bigger than Victor Caro, bigger than business rivalries or stolen companies. And Elira Navarro was right in the middle of it. Magnus hired the best investigators money could buy. Former FBI agents, private military contractors, cybersecurity specialists who could hack into systems that didn't officially exist. If Elira Navarro was anywhere on the planet, they would find her. But 3 weeks into the search, the trail was ice cold. It's like she vanished into thin air, his lead investigator, Torres, reported during their morning briefing. No credit card usage, no phone activity, no social media presence. Either she's dead or someone with serious resources is keeping her hidden. She's not dead. Magnus stared at the wall of photos, documents, and red string that had taken over his penthouse office. I would know if she was dead. Sir, with respect, we need to consider all possibilities. She's alive. Magnus' voice brooked no argument. Find her. But as the days stretched into weeks, doubt began to creep in. The black sedan from that night had been traced to a rental company that didn't exist. The address was a vacant lot. The credit card used for payment belonged to a dead man. Whoever had taken Elira was professional, organized, connected, and they were sending a message. Stop looking or face the consequences. The first warning came in the form of a cyber attack that brought down Hale Industries' entire computer network for 6 hours. The second was a small fire in Magnus' penthouse lobby, contained quickly, no injuries, but the message was clear. The third warning was personal. Carlos Navarro disappeared on his way home from school. Magnus got the call from Elira's mother, Sophia, her voice shattered with panic. He never came home. The school said he left at normal time, but he never made it to the apartment. Magnus, please, you have to help me find my boy. Within an hour, Magnus had every security camera in a 12-block radius pulled and analyzed. The footage showed Carlos walking his usual route, then turning down an alley he'd never used before. Like he was following someone. Or something. 2 blocks later, the cameras went dark. All of them. At exactly the same time. Professional job, Torres muttered, studying the footage. Someone with access to the city's surveillance grid. That's not small-time criminal activity. That's government-level resources. Magnus felt something cold settle in his stomach. How long has the boy been missing? For hours. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Stop looking for the girl, or the boy pays the price. You have 24 hours to call off your dogs. If you were hunting someone you loved, how far would you go? Comment below. Because Magnus was about to make a choice that would either save 2 innocent lives or destroy everything he built. Some searches lead you exactly where you need to be. Others lead you straight into hell. And Magnus was beginning to realize he couldn't tell the difference anymore. The betrayal came from inside Magnus' own organization. Torres, his head of security, had been feeding information to Victor's allies from the beginning. Every search route, every lead, every safe house Magnus had set up for Alira's family, all of it reported back to the very people they were fighting. Magnus discovered it by accident. He'd arrived at the office early, around 5 a.m., hoping to review the latest surveillance footage in peace. That's when he heard Torres on the phone in the conference room. Door cracked just enough to catch fragments of conversation. Pulled all security from the east side. Boy is secured at location 7. Hale's getting desperate, making mistakes. Magnus slipped closer, recording every word on his phone. No, don't move the girl yet. Keep her where she is until we know for certain he's backing down. If he calls off the investigation, we'll consider releasing the boy unharmed. The blood in Magnus' veins turned to ice. His own security chief, a man he'd trusted with his life, was working for the enemy. But Torres wasn't alone. Victor's network is deeper than we thought. Magnus learned when he confronted the one man on his team he knew he could trust, Rico Santos, a former Navy SEAL who'd saved Magnus' life twice in hostile overseas negotiations. At least 3 of your board members are compromised, Rico continued, spreading files across Magnus' private office. They've been feeding intelligence to Victor's people for months, maybe years. This whole thing, your relationship with Alira, the scandal, even the kidnapping, it's all been orchestrated. By who? That's where it gets interesting. Rico pointed to a photograph of a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. Vincent Cross, Victor's older brother. He's been operating in the shadows, using Victor as a front while he builds his own empire. Magnus studied the photo. Vincent Cross looked like Victor, but harder, colder. The kind of man who'd order a child's murder and sleep soundly afterward. He wants Hale Industries. He wants everything. Your company, your assets, your reputation. And he's been using your feelings for Alira as the perfect weapon to destroy your judgment. But then Rico showed him something unexpected. Not everyone in Victor's network is loyal to Vincent. He pulled out another set of files. These 3 men, supposedly Victor's enforcers, have been secretly feeding us information. They think Vincent has gone too far, especially with the kid. Magnus looked at the names: Marcus Webb, Anthony Kane, Diego Vargas. Men with military backgrounds, family men themselves, who'd signed up to intimidate businessmen, not kidnap children. They want out. They want Vincent stopped. And they're willing to help us do it. Rico leaned forward. But it has to be tonight. Vincent's moving both Alira and Carlos to a new location tomorrow. After that, we may never find them. Magnus stood at his office window, looking out at the city he'd conquered through 15 years of calculated risks and perfect timing. Now he was facing the biggest gamble of his life. Trust men who'd betrayed their own boss. Walk into what was almost certainly a trap. Risk everything on the word of criminals who claimed to have grown a conscience. But what choice did he have? Somewhere in this city, the woman he loved and an innocent 12-year-old boy were waiting for rescue. And time was running out. The warehouse sat on the edge of the industrial district like a monument to urban decay. Magnus approached in darkness, Rico and 2 other loyal security men flanking him. According to their intelligence, Alira and Carlos were being held on the 3rd floor, guarded by at least 6 armed men. The odds weren't good. Last chance to call this off, Rico whispered as they reached the loading dock. We could wait for federal backup. No time. Magnus checked his weapon, something he'd never imagined he'd need for anything other than target practice. Vincent's moving them at dawn. It's now or never. The first guard went down silently, taken out by Rico with military precision. The second never saw them coming. But as they climbed the rusted stairs to the third floor, Magnus knew their luck was running out. Vincent Cross was waiting for them. "Mr. Hale." Vincent's voice echoed through the cavernous space. Right on time. 20 feet away, Elira and Carlos sat tied to chairs under harsh industrial lighting. Both were alive, both unharmed, but terror was written across their faces. 6 men with automatic weapons surrounded them. "Let them go," Magnus said, stepping into the light with his hands visible. "Your fight is with me." "My fight was never personal, Magnus. This is strictly business." Vincent smiled the same cold smile his brother had perfected. "You've built quite an empire. I simply want to buy it from you. It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." Vincent nodded, and one of his men pressed a gun to Carlos's head. The boy, 12 years old and trembling, looked at Magnus with eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. "Don't hurt him," Elira said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Please. He's just a child." "Indeed he is. And children are so fragile." Vincent's eyes never left Magnus. "Here's my offer. Sign over controlling interest in Hale Industries, and these two walk away. Refuse, and, well, accidents happen." Magnus felt rage building in his chest, white-hot fury that made his vision blur. But behind it was something else, calculation. The same ice-cold business instinct that had made him billions. "Before I decide," Magnus said carefully, "I want to know how this ends. Let's say I sign your papers. What's to stop you from killing us all anyway?" "Nothing," Vincent admitted. "But I'm a businessman, not a monster. Dead bodies create complications. Live witnesses who keep their mouths shut, that's just good business. And if they don't keep their mouths shut," Vincent's smile widened, "then we have this conversation again." That's when Magnus saw it, a flash of movement in the shadows behind Vincent's men. Rico and the others had found another way in. But they needed a distraction. "You know what, Vincent?" Magnus pulled out his phone. "You win. But I want to record my surrender. For legal purposes." "Record away." Magnus hit the voice recording app and spoke clearly. "This is Magnus Hale, CEO of Hale Industries. I am being coerced under threat of violence against innocent civilians to sign over my company to Vincent Cross, who has admitted to kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy." Vincent's face went white. "Turn that off. I am making this recording under duress, while Vincent Cross holds a 12-year-old boy at gunpoint." The attack came from 3 directions at once. Rico dropped from the ceiling rafters like an angel of death. Magnus dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets filled the air. In the chaos, he saw Elira somehow work her hands free and shield Carlos with her own body. When the gunfire stopped, Vincent Cross was on the ground, wounded but alive. His men were either unconscious or fleeing. And for the first time in weeks, Magnus could breathe. "Are you hurt?" he called to Elira. She shook her head, still protecting Carlos. "We're okay. We're both okay. Would you risk your life to save the one you love? Tell me below," because Magnus' gamble had paid off. But the real test was still to come. Could 2 people who'd been through hell find their way back to each other? In the aftermath of the warehouse rescue, as police sirens wailed and paramedics checked Carlos for injuries, the whole truth finally came out. Elira sat in the back of an ambulance, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and told Magnus everything. "I never disappeared by choice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "After our fight in the alley, after you threw that money at me, Vincent's people were waiting at my apartment. They said signing Victor's contract wasn't enough anymore. They needed me gone completely." Magnus felt his heart break all over again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "How could I? They had photos of you at your office, at your penthouse, at restaurants. They knew your entire schedule. They said if I tried to contact you, they'd kill you and make it look like a business rival's revenge. The pieces finally clicked into place. The mysterious phone calls, the cyber attacks, the escalating threats that had pushed him to the breaking point. So you let me think you'd taken the money and run. It was the only way to keep you safe. Tears streamed down her face, even when it destroyed me to see the hate in your eyes. But there was more. Kalia didn't betray me for money, Elira continued. Vincent's people had her grandmother, threatened to cut off her dialysis treatments if she didn't cooperate. She was trying to save the only family she had left. Magnus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his own rage and judgment. How quickly he'd believed the worst about both women. How easily Vincent had manipulated him into destroying the relationships that mattered most. There's something else, Elira said, glancing nervously at the police cars surrounding them. Vincent wasn't the mastermind. He was just middle management. What do you mean? While they held me, I heard phone calls. Vincent reported to someone higher up. Someone with connections in government, law enforcement, even federal agencies. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Magnus, this network, it's bigger than we imagined. Vincent and Victor were just foot soldiers. Magnus felt ice form in his veins. Who's really behind this? I don't know. But they're not done with us. Vincent's arrest won't stop them. It'll just make them more careful next time. As if summoned by her words, Magnus' phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Well played, Mr. Hale. Round 1 goes to you. But there will be other rounds. Other opportunities. We'll be in touch. Magnus showed Elira the message. Her face went pale. They're warning us, she said. Let them come. Magnus' voice was steel. I know who they are now. I know how they operate. And I have something they'll never understand. What's that? Someone worth fighting for. He took her hand, carefully avoiding her bandaged wrists. Someone who sacrificed everything to protect the people she loves. Someone who reminds me why none of this money and power matters if you don't have anyone to share it with. But even as Magnus spoke the words, both of them knew the truth. The real enemy was still out there, still watching, still planning. And their love story was far from over. Magnus Hale had built his fortune by being thorough, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. Destroying Vincent Cross's network required all 3 qualities. Within 48 hours of the warehouse rescue, Magnus had teams of investigators, forensic accountants, and cyber specialists dissecting every aspect of the Cross Brothers operation. Bank accounts were frozen. Shell companies were exposed. Corrupt officials found their dirty deals splashed across newspaper headlines. But Magnus' first priority was clearing Elira's name. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, he said, standing at a podium in front of Hale Industries headquarters, cameras flashing like lightning. 3 weeks ago, a young woman named Elira Navarro was publicly humiliated based on fabricated evidence. Today, I'm here to set the record straight. The crowd of reporters leaned forward eagerly. Miss Navarro was the victim of an elaborate extortion scheme orchestrated by Vincent Cross and his network of associates. She was threatened, blackmailed, and ultimately kidnapped, all because she refused to be used as a weapon against me. Magnus pulled out a thick folder of documents. These are financial records showing payments from Vincent Cross to various individuals, including my former head of security and a college student who was coerced into betraying her best friend. These are recorded confessions from Vincent Cross himself, admitting to kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy. The questions came like bullets. Mr. Hale, are you saying you were in a relationship with Miss Navarro? I'm saying Miss Navarro is one of the most courageous people I've ever met. She chose to protect her family and me at enormous personal cost. Where is she now? Magnus paused. That was the question that had been eating at him for days. Miss Navarro is recovering from her ordeal. She's asked for privacy while she rebuilds her life. What he didn't tell them was that Elira had disappeared again. Not kidnapped this time, by choice. She'd left a note on his nightstand while he slept. I need time to figure out who I am when I'm not running or hiding. Give me space to heal. If we're meant to be together, we'll find our way back to each other. The press conference continued for another hour. Magnus announced a $50 million fund for victims of extortion and blackmail. He revealed that several government officials were under investigation for their connections to the Cross network. But as the cameras stopped rolling, one question haunted him. We've all faced moments where we must choose between family, love, and safety. What would you choose? Because that's the choice Alira had made over and over again. She'd chosen family when Victor threatened Carlos. She'd chosen Magnus' safety when Vincent kidnapped her. She'd chosen healing when the nightmare finally ended. Each choice had cost her something. But each choice had also revealed who she really was. Someone who put others before herself. Someone who fought for what mattered, even when fighting meant sacrifice. Someone worth waiting for, no matter how long it took. But would she ever come back? Or had Magnus lost her forever to the very courage he admired most? 6 months later, Magnus kept a single white rose on his office desk. Fresh one every morning, placed in a crystal vase that caught the sunrise through his penthouse windows. His assistant never asked why. His board members learned not to comment on it. But everyone who entered Magnus Hale's office knew that rose meant something important. It was a reminder of fire in dark eyes, of stubborn pride that refused to break even under impossible pressure, of a girl who'd stood in thunderstorms selling flowers and taught a billionaire what real strength looked like. Alira Navarro had vanished as completely as morning mist. No social media presence. No credit card trail. No forwarded mail or employment records. Magnus investigators, the best money could buy, found nothing. It was as if she'd learned from her kidnappers how to disappear without a trace. But sometimes, late at night, Magnus would get cryptic messages that made his heart race. A photo of white roses in a small-town flower shop, sent from an untraceable number. A news article about a college psychology program receiving an anonymous donation, forwarded without comment. A single text message on the anniversary of their first meeting. The girl with the roses remembers. Was she reaching out? Or was someone else playing games with his emotions? Magnus chose to believe it was her. He'd rebuilt Hale Industries into something stronger than before. Cleaner. More ethical. The kind of company that helped people instead of exploiting them. The Vincent Cross investigation had led to dozens of arrests, including 3 senators and a federal judge. The corruption network was broken, but Magnus knew others would try to fill the vacuum. Power always attracted parasites. But he'd also learned something Vincent Cross never understood. Real power came from having something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth waiting for. Carlos Navarro was thriving in private school, his trauma healing slowly but steadily. Sophia's medical bills were covered by a trust fund Magnus had set up anonymously. Calia Rodriguez was working at a victims' rights organization, trying to atone for her betrayal by helping others. The roses kept coming every morning, and Magnus kept hoping. Did Alira leave by choice, or was she taken? Comment your theory. The best ones I'll feature next, because the truth is, even I don't know for certain. Maybe she's building a new life somewhere warm, helping children the way she always dreamed. Maybe she's still running from shadows that refuse to let her rest. Maybe she's waiting for the right moment to come home. Or maybe, just maybe, she's reading the story right now, remembering thunderstorms and roses and a billionaire who learned that some things can't be bought. Love, courage, the strength to sacrifice everything for the people who matter most. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story that could change how you see love, power, and betrayal forever. Because in a world where money talks and power corrupts, sometimes the most powerful thing of all is a heart that refuses to give up hope. Even when hope is all you have left. The rose on Magnus Hale's desk will be there tomorrow morning. and the morning after that. For as long as it takes.